Welcome back to Tell Me More with me, CJ Quarterbaum. Tell Me More exists to help bridge the gaps that we seem to experience in our intergenerational work dynamics and to help us build better leaders. Today, I get to be joined by a good friend of mine, Vicky Gu. Vicky, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do now?
Yeah, I so I guess my quick one-liner is I am from Dallas, with roots in Shanghai and DC, and I currently live in Brooklyn, and I call myself an editor strategist. Right now, I independently consult on brand and strategy for organizations ranging from startups to bootstrap profitable companies to just, I don't know, really cool, unique teams, I think, doing things that are exciting.
Cool. You guys don't know this, but Vicky is one of my life inspirations. A couple of years ago, I watched her embark on this independent journey, as scary and what can feel like maybe dangerous, but go out with confidence, even if it was feigned confidence, and pull it off. And now she's a thriving success story. So, Vicky, I just want to say, as someone who's known you for a couple of years now, I'm proud of you. I think you've come such a long way and you do such amazing work. And I love your writing, which I want the people to follow. What's the name of your Substack?
It's called Hyperdisciplinary is the name of my newsletter, but it's just my name, vickygu.substack.com.
So Vicky and I are going to talk a little bit about leadership because a couple of weeks ago you had a post that, I mean, it just kind of hit the nail on the head. One of the lines in there, let me see, I'm pulling it up. Know when to speak the truth and when to practice restraint. Let's talk leadership. What I say leadership, what comes to mind? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is actually the line I said right before we started recording was just like what has struck me with navigating a lot of the messiness of life is how do you walk through the mess? How do you walk through hard things with grace? But also respect, not just for the other party, but for yourself, right? It's like self-respect. And so that it all ladders up to like, I don't, it's like grace and integrity. I think that's what leadership is about. At least for me, that's where my most formative experiences with leaders I appreciate. Um, that's what they've taught me. Like my first manager out of college, I used to do things that were clearly out of my own insecurity, and every time she was just so gentle with pulling me aside, like never reprimand me in public, but just would pull me over and be like, "Hey, notice you did this. Yeah, what's up? Why did you do that? Just like tell me more about like what led you to say or do that." And it was so gentle, and because I was often operating out of a place of fear, as you are when you're just like out of college, you're not sure of your place, your stability within a larger organization, and she was so great and like saying it's okay to have that, but also like you don't have to work out of that, and I want this to be a safe space for you to like process that together with me.
Man, I feel like what's really good about what she did is she instilled confidence in you. Um, any of us walking into, so I would say, fresh out of college for sure. But what I found for a lot of people is throughout their careers, that feeling of maybe imposter syndrome or just insecurity, it tends to follow us and walk with us. And there are very few people who just walk into a room and they're just confident all the time, whether it is deserved or undeserved. But to have a leader who looked at you and said, I see what you're doing. It doesn't have to be this way. Let me walk with you. I think it's just so telling about the type of person she was.
Mhm.
You use the words grace and integrity in leadership. What does that mean to you?
Mhm. I think I'll start with integrity because it's a word we see a lot, and I think it's a word that many organizations use as one of their like principles or values that they often um, teach or train or coach the team on. When in reality, it's unfortunate because I think it's just so hard to put integrity in practice when it's like, would you treat a superior versus like someone who's reporting into you or a peer? Like, are you treating those three people the same in terms of the respect that you pay them? And that's not often the case. And that's something that angers me, quite frankly. Uh, and I don't know, this is something I'm still working with, and maybe like you can probably figure out ways to edit this because I'm still figuring out my thoughts on this too. But we can happy to hear you react to this too on like 'cause I wanted to start with integrity because I think as a woman, as someone who comes from like a Chinese heritage to as someone who like has had experience growing up in the church, there are so many voices all the time, like telling me to be more quiet, be more demure, be more mindful. Like that when that TikTok trend came up, I was like, please don't share that with me. I'm like I'm over it. Because
Yeah.
what happens when I'm quiet and demure and considerate is people abuse their proximity to me, they abuse their access to me,
Mm,
they take advantage of the trust that I lend. And so I've had to learn how to like carry myself sometimes with more restraint in the beginning until like you can establish trust with someone because it's just you can't take it for granted. And I think there are a lot of women like me who may come from similar experiences where like these are a lot of the core challenges that you deal with in terms of like the soft skills, but beneath the soft skills in the workplace, and undoing or unlearning some of those impulses that have been drilled into us from our childhood and realizing that's actually not what sets you up for not just success but like healthy sustainable growth in the American workplace.
that's good. That's so, you just brought so much into that cultural background, your gender, what is the expectations of the American workplace, because we know that things are different globally. Um, how do you overcome some of these background things for you where you're told be mindful, be demure, be easygoing, don't ruffle any feathers, but seeing that when you do that people take advantage of that, but then also on top of that, for you to display other characteristics, now people want to paint you in a negative light. You have a contrary opinion and all of a sudden, oh, she's just an angry emotional woman. Like I feel so much for women when if you display any emotion, it's like, oh, look, she's emotional, and now everything you say is discredited. And I experienced that as I'm an emotional man. I actually had someone say to me the other day, "You just have such big emotions," and they didn't mean that. It was like a backhanded thing that they were saying.
Mm,
But I recognized that when my emotions are on display, I'm immediately the angry black man, and everything gets
mm,
discredited. So, in your experience, how do you find that balance?
yeah, it is. I have so many thoughts to that. I think like one point I've thought about a lot is also like not over indexing on gender too, because I found people of all genders and backgrounds will surprise you, in good ways or bad ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes a lot more from like knowing yourself and knowing the specific, like often implicit value systems within your organization and your team and thinking about like is this a place that's actually open and welcoming for me to express who I am, because I think actually a lot about Joan Didion wrote this profile on Martha Stewart like a long time ago, and there's a line that spoke so clearly to me because she described Martha Stewart as having this proprietary intimacy, and that was like the key ingredient to like her flourishing, which was fascinating because intimacy is something that is not celebrated in the workplace. And I will say, like, in a good way too, this goes back to restraint. I'm not in the camp of bring your whole self to work. Like, yes, express yourself, but you don't need to exercise every part of yourself at work. It's just one aspect of your life. But at the same time, even when I thought about naming my independent consulting practice, it's called Skin Contact Studio, and the like main inspiration actually comes from skin contact wine. So the color of a wine is determined by the amount of time the grapes like ferment or sit in their skins. And so I just really like that concept, and it often and when you play with that amount of time, you get really interesting results. So that was something in my mind, but also, the phrase skin contact has this feeling of intimacy, and I've I've been trying to figure out like what is my personal ethos, like my operating ethos. it doesn't just have to be like how you build infrastructure or how you set up processes. It's also how you relate to people, how you conduct your business development. And for me, I think too, I mean, it goes back to culture and heritage. I think of like my father or my parents are immigrant entrepreneurs. And so I've been around a lot of like Chinese businessmen and Chinese businesswomen. And it's really different from the way Americans do business. And there is this, I think there are parts of it that can be unhealthy as well and that are changing for in good ways. But there is this like foundational lever of we need to trust you before we make millions of dollars together. And trust, we build that up through like just social situations and connections. So like having dinner and, maybe don't get like drunk under the table, but it's just, I've realized that that part is really key to my process. And I don't
Mm.
have to, like, if I feel like I have to, restraint is one thing, but if I'm repressing that, then like that's a sign that it's just not a good fit. So I need to find, and I think it like so much of it comes from scoping and filtering any conversation you're having. The way I think about navigating grace and integrity, I suppose for me, is getting much better at asking the right questions before I enter a situation. Like when you're interviewing with a company, it's not about asking how's culture like. It's about asking pointed questions where your interviewer can't hide from. So, like, can you tell me about the state of diversity or equity or inclusion at the company? What are some statistics, and like how are you approaching? What are you doing about those statistics, right? And asking those kind of questions, and also just yeah, making sure you're talking to the right people, asking the right questions, so that you're entering spaces that will welcome your whole self. And I don't say that again in this give all of yourself way, but in just the like being able to exist as yourself.
No, I think that's really good. It points to this idea of psychological safety, right? I agree with you in that your entire self doesn't come with you to work, but you want a good portion of yourself to be
Mhm.
there. And you ultimately want to operate in alignment with your values and who you are. Work shouldn't be this place where you feel like I'm putting on a mask in order to show up and be here. I'm playing a role. The where we get the word hypocrite from is the Greek word like Hippocrates or something like that. And it literally means to wear a mask. So I hear that, but I think about a lot of people who are applying for jobs or they're interviewing, they don't always feel that they have the option, especially in this economy, that they have
Mhm.
the option to ask those tough questions. Or it's like, I need a job. I can't mess around and try to figure out if this is the right fit. And then we find ourselves in places that are out of alignment with who we are or don't align with our values. And now we feel stuck. What do you say to the person who's in that place?
It's a great question. I think there is a lot of wisdom and grace to understanding everyone comes from a different situation. Everyone has different freedoms associated with that situation. And sometimes you don't have the liberty to work at the pacing or the rhythm of what you want to in terms of like kind of that urgency in paying the bills, for example, or caring for a dependent. And I recognize that. But I think like this is just where the
Mm,
community comes in, right? Like I think anytime I've ever like transitioned out of a situation, and it doesn't, it's like, whether at work or in life, this really applies to anything. It's because I know I will find greater peace in leaving a situation than staying. And there doesn't have to be hard feelings involved, but it's just like sometimes when there is a break, two parties will have different perspectives, and sometimes those perspectives may never meet. And that's okay. And that's kind of the heartbreak of life because it's going to keep happening. But you have to believe in better. Like, you have to hope it can be better. I think a lot of times people leave situations bitter or jaded, but actually, I think the act of leaving is an act of hope more than it is an act of like despair, because it's kind of acting in this faith or belief, whether you can articulate it or not, that there is going to be something that is more right for you and what you're looking for and what someone or something else is looking for. And so I think what I would say is just like I don't know, find the people who will be your cheerleaders for your quit party. Like, or it's like find the people who will give you that moral support to help you overcome the inertia of whether it's the comfort or the challenges of being in a place that may not be like the best for you anymore. Because sometimes you enter a place and it's good until it's not good. You know, it's not necessarily something you can always predict because you and the factors outside you will change in different ways that none of you can control. And so it's just about being in tune and aware and always checking in with yourself. I think a lot of people, when they get into jobs, you know, they go heads down and they don't cultivate checking in with people in other industries or just friends who are working in other places. I think it's just like, it just takes active work. And when you've built up that relational infrastructure, that is what gives you the freedom, at least emotionally. I think financially is another situation, but the freedom and the space to be able to like prepare all the other factors in your life for kind of welcoming and inviting in the next step to come.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said there. Like it's not all good or all bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just is, or it's good until it's
Hmm.
not good. And I've been there plenty of times. And I think I like what you said about not leaving bitter or angry, even if the reason you're leaving is a reason that you should be bitter or angry.
Hmm.
It's recognizing this was a season of my life and the season has come to an end. And therefore, I could be hurt. I could be upset, but I recognize the season's over. And ultimately, I talk a lot here on this channel about the concept of post-traumatic growth. And
Hmm.
so when we experience pain and frustration and anger or whatever, we get two choices. We can wallow in it or we can grow from it. And I think leaving a job in particular is one of those points in life in which we get to make a choice. We can wallow in, this was bad, they lied to me, they did me dirty, they did all these things, or what did I learn from the situation so that next time I'm better equipped to handle it and things can go different. What are, for you, what are some of your leadership red flags?
Oh, so this probably goes, my red flags of a leader actually go quite hand in hand with my red flags in like just strategy and the work of the work,
Mm,
like how you operate your business, because it reflects aspects of your character as well. So, for example, I work in the brand universe, and when I say that, it encompasses, you know, marketing, narrative, content, communications, um, partnerships, sometimes even like corporate social responsibility. And so you can tell a lot about someone's leadership style by the way they approach a business problem. Because in marketing and brand, it's so easy. It's such a visible function, right? It's not operations and not internal. So, of course, every social media post you make, people will see. And so there is this like impulse or itch to get seek that kind of external validation or try to look for
mm,
quick hits and quick wins. When in reality, marketing is just like any other function. There are quick wins, but they're only undergirded by like laying the long term um, work for this quick win. So like brand, you know, it's like think of equity. You should be investing in things over time to see it all compound over time, as opposed to wanting quick wins. So I think a red flag for me is almost urgency. And I
mm,
say this while recognizing the reality of business. Like you need to keep your business afloat, especially when the markets are down. Like I totally get that. I think there are short term tactics that we always need to have on to be generating revenue. I believe in that. I believe in having the operational prowess to like make sure those are on. But the problem is a lot of people over index on that and don't and underinvest into those long term, say, brand building efforts. But again, this applies to any function. And I think it's that short sightedness that urgency comes with that is usually concerning to me because it means someone doesn't fully intuit or understand or are open to understanding like the value of brand and what a function brings to the table. So that's a red flag. I think another one is, oh, I had it and then I lost it. Okay, we can keep going. It might come
mm.
back to me.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say urgency as a as a red flag, but it makes me think about the leader who is constantly putting out fires or acting
Mm,
like everything is a crisis. It, I see what you're saying there. There's almost a it's indicative of an instability in you as a
mm,
person that is concerning. Man, I really like that. That's good. Tuck that in the back of my mind.
yeah. Um, Shoot, what else was I thinking? There's another one. I can't remember it.
If it comes back to you,
Yeah.
just interrupt me.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not going to talk that long because I'm going to ask you another question. So you've been in this leadership space yourself now for a couple of years. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned as you've transitioned into this lead role?
It a lot of it goes back to our earlier conversations on grace and integrity, because I think as a leader, it's similar to being in any sort of relationship or partnership with someone. Over time, the partnership teaches you not just about the other person, but more about yourself.
Mm,
And it's almost more imperative that you are aware of the things, of the ways you can be better and more honorable, more true to those around you. And so, as for me, the question was what I've learned.
yeah,
Yeah, I think what I've learned goes back to like leading with grace. Basically, the lessons I need to take are almost they're very ironic lessons, because for me, leading with grace actually means being less quote unquote graceful in the eyes of like the definition of grace I was brought up in. It means being more direct. It means not having patience for things that are unjust or not right or abusive. It means not having tolerance for that sort of thing. It means understanding that peace comes at a cost, that having integrity means eating the cost of probably someone else's misconduct. And so for me, what I've learned is just like how how can I learn how to be a better advocate for myself, which is extended to my people, my teams, because also those who work in brand and marketing functions, like there are a lot of women, and I think there are a lot of, and especially with creatives too, they're much more, we tend to be more intuitive and in tune with like reading emotions of a room too. And sometimes you're not as prepared on the spot to have the scripts or the language of effectively and succinctly dealing with situations of misconduct. And so you kind of waffle, or you don't like nip things in the bud, or you're not as able to catch them in the moment as quickly. Versus I think there are a lot of people who just roll up and they just like call BS for BS. And I've always admired that sometimes in my coworkers. And it's nice because I have coworkers who will say, well, but you're really good at having more empathy in places where maybe it's appropriate to start with that. Well, I think it is always appropriate to start with it, but it's just like how do you like rebalance the whole having empathy, but being direct and proactive in how you communicate. And I think you like most people start, it's like you're more naturally inclined towards like one of those levers, and it's like understanding where you fall and where and how you can rebalance healthily. I feel like I kind of rambled there.
no, that's good. I What I want to know, and I think what a lot of people would want to know in this moment is how did you learn to do this well? Because
Mm,
I think there are people who are natural born leaders, but
yeah,
being born a leader doesn't make you a good leader. I think
yeah,
good leadership, great leadership is formed. So
yeah.
what was it for you? What were some of those
Oh,
formative experiences or maybe books you've read or conferences you've attended that have helped you become the leader you are today?
oh, yes. I would say I learned through pain, and I
Mm,
learned through opening myself up. I learned through trusting. I learned through investing really deeply and caring really hard about my people, and then being let down or being hurt or going through situations of harassment or misconduct, and seeing all of the trust I had worked so hard for slip between my fingers for
mm,
reasons that I couldn't control. I think, and then that actually brought me back to those situations always do, I think, healthily cause me to remember moments where I didn't feel that way. Or like I'll talk about my experience with a friend who will share a counter experience in a sense of like maybe they had something similar happen, but they actually ended up leaving with more respect from the party that hurt them. Or and so I think it's just like letting the pain drive you back towards sources of good that you've seen. I never want to discredit the good that I have received from like really empathetic um, and nurturing leaders. So that's the only way I've learned. Pain and like a long time of healing and recalibration and not forcing yourself to work when you know your body can't work. Um, and using that to look for the right people afterwards.
Growing from the pain, that's post-traumatic growth. I love what you said about investing and caring deeply in your people, because I've come across a lot of leaders who will say, that's not my job. Like, my job is to just get you to do your job. And this
Mm.
is work, and I'm not trying to invest in you or care about you. But I don't think that, like, please don't die on this podcast. I don't have the insurance for that. And I can't fill out an incident report.
I'll have my lawyer call you.
um, how would you respond to the person who approaches leadership in that way?
Hmm. I it's hard because I do meet like I know a lot of people who naturally the way they conduct business is more detached emotionally. And I think there's a lot of goodness to that too, because I come from the camp where like you invest sometimes to the point of overinvest and you realize when you need to like showcase more restraint. So what I would say to someone who is not as naturally prone to investing is like, you should still be uncomfortable, right? Like, you can say emotional detachment is healthy and that's actually the safest for the company in terms of liability and all that, but you're still leaving something on the table. There's a potential that you haven't unlocked in the people around you because you haven't allowed yourself to be known by them or them by you in a way that fosters the trust and, like you said, the psychological safety. Um, I'm not trying to overemphasize the psychological safety, but it's just like that openness is what helps someone grow in ways that neither of you could have ever expected. And you're leaving a lot on the table if you don't ask yourself seriously what would happen if you did one or two more practices, right? You could even turn it into a process, some sort of ritual of team building where it's not something that feels like mushy gushy emotional, but actually is a measurable item. I think that's actually pretty healthy. Um, so yeah.
So, what I will say is, the older I get, the more I recognize, I think this is me, in order to get the best out of your people, psychological safety matters. And so
Mhm.
I don't know if there is such a thing as over indexing on psychological safety for me.
Mm,
And maybe that could just be like the spaces and places that I operate in.
yeah.
Um, but I think it just translates across businesses. So I read this book earlier this year, The Fearless Organization by
Hmm.
shoot, I can't remember her name now. But it's this really great book that's all about psychological safety and getting the best out of your people. I start this podcast, and the first person I interview, Dr. Patricia Hewlin, who teaches business at Columbia University, she brings up this concept of psychological safety. And it kind of gives language to so much of what people experience in the workplace. And ultimately, as leaders, when we create an atmosphere of psychological safety, when we make people feel valued, feel cared for, even if you're faking it, if people feel it, they are
Hmm.
more inclined to get more from you. I have had leaders that I would run through a brick wall for. And those are typically the leaders who created high psychological safety. But those leaders who create environments and atmospheres of like distrust and dishonesty and competition rather than collaboration, those are always the leaders that people talk about behind their backs, that they trauma bond over, and ultimately work for reluctantly. And those are the leaders who have high turnover rates and just it feels like their teams, as you said, are leaving something on the table.
Yeah, actually, to your point about also like I don't believe in. I agree in that I cannot emphasize psychological safety enough. I think having worked for a long time in more, whether it's like a startup or corporate setting, I understand that phrase doesn't resonate for a lot of people. So another thing I'm also thinking about is how do we say it in a way that makes sense to someone where it clicks and it isn't just, oh, those are the culture or the people or the change management people, trying to like imbue some thing to protect the employees at the cost of revenue. Like I think I'm constantly thinking of the work of translation, which is always a part of the work of the work.
Yeah. All right. So as we start to wrap this up, I love to ask the question: what are for you the three most important characteristics in a leader?
Oh man. Oh, I should have thought about this beforehand.
I probably should have told you beforehand.
You should have told me beforehand. Correct.
I like to just flow and then
Hmm.
see what comes off the top of the brain.
I'm kind of like thinking back to just talking about grace and integrity at the beginning. I don't know, it feels like a cop out, but I think that makes sense. It means I'm consistent.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, let's just roll with it for the sake of time. Maybe something will come later, but three
Grace.
things important to me in a leader: grace. I'm going to lead with integrity
Mm,
because grace can be twisted in a lot of directions that sometimes makes me uneasy. But integrity, grace, and I need to find the antonym of urgency. What I was talking about earlier about the red flag, like what's
mm.
patience?
Maybe like patience or
Yeah,
calm or not easiness. I don't think easiness is the right word.
I
But
think patience.
grace, integrity, and patience. I love that. Vicky, tell the people where
TBD.
can they find your work?
Uh, VickyGoo.com is the central palace of all the information that you can find on me. It links to my newsletter, and yeah, it's a
I'll
good
leave a
place.
link in the show notes.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can find me loitering at the used guitar shop in my neighborhood. That's another place.
I dig that.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Tell Me More. Here we are, yet again, talking about leadership. The goal and the desire is always to build better leaders. Drop something in the comments below. Tell me, what are your top three characteristics for a leader? Vicky's are grace, integrity, and patience. I'd love to hear yours. See you next time as I ask you to tell me more.
That's more.
Woot woot.